Pretend you're on the other side of this person. They're one of the many volunteers for a scientific experiment. Their job as a learner is to get answers right on a test. As part of the research team for this experiment, your job as a teacher is to press a button when they get things wrong. The button delivers a slight electric shock of 15 volts to the learner's chair. Here's the catch. With each wrong answer, the shocks increase in intensity up to a maximum of 450 volts, a severe shock. How high of a voltage would you be willing to administer? And do you think you'd go up to the maximum? Probably not, right? At least that's what you think. This was the exact problem faced by the subjects of the Milgram Experiment of 1963. The results were shocking. In the experiment, a whopping 65% of the teachers continued to the maximum of 450 volts. All of them got to 300 volts. For reference, that level of shock is life-threatening, so it's bizarre to see just how many of these folks were willing to dish out that much pain. Now, you're probably thinking, how evil were these people that they could do this? Why didn't anybody refuse to administer the 300-volt shock? Why were they fine with potentially being somebody's executioner? Well, it wasn't that simple. And it makes more sense when you hear about the context.
But why didn't you just stop?
He wouldn't let me. I wanted to stop. I kept insisting to stop, but he says no.
In Milgram's words, the participants were likely in an agentic state. That's when you're not really taking full responsibility for your actions, like when you're playing a game and you just follow the rules. You don't really think about it, so you don't feel as responsible for what's happening, because in your mind, you're just following orders. In other words, you act like an agent for somebody else's will. The opposite of this is when we're in an autonomous state. That's when you make your own choices and do what you think is right.
I don't want to go any further with it.
You had no other choice, teacher.
I have a choice. I'm not going to go ahead with it.
You're in full control and take responsibility for your own actions. We like to think that we're always in the autonomous state, but Milgram thinks otherwise. According to him, going into the agentic state becomes much easier when the authority figure seems legit and when we believe they'll be accountable for whatever happens.
Something's happened to that man in there. You better check in on him, sir. He won't answer me or nothing.
Please continue. Go on, please.
You accept all responsibility?
The responsibility is mine, correct. Please go on.
In certain settings like school or work, where we often trust our superiors, it's not hard to meet these two conditions. This is also true for the Milgram experiment, which was done in a highly professional setting. Everything about the experiment appeared legitimate. It was held in the prestigious Yale University and run by a respected psychology professor named Stanley Milgram. These factors gave the experiment a lot of credibility, which means the participants were likely in an agentic state, making them more compliant. The participants probably felt that they were doing something purposeful and safe. But despite the high compliance rate, the participants weren't as agreeable as you might think. Many of them hated administering the shocks. Some of them trembled, bit their lips, and even clawed at their own skin.
Well, essential or not, this program isn't quite that important to me that I should go along doing something that I know nothing about, particularly if it's going to injure someone.
Even though they did it, they clearly didn't want to, and many of them did in fact refuse. But Milgram was ready for this kind of insubordination. Whenever somebody refused to administer a shock, they would have been told one of the following prompts.
Please continue. The experiment requires that we continue. It's absolutely essential that you continue. You had no other choice, teacher.
It was a lot of pressure.
Please continue. The next word is white.
But you think you should look in on him, please?
Not once we've started the
But
experiment.
what if something's happened to the man had an attack or something there?
The experiment requires that we continue. Go on, please.
Don't the man's health mean anything?
Whether the learner likes it or not, we
But
must...
he might be dead in there. I mean, some people can't take the shock, sir.
Please
I mean,
continue.
I don't tend to be rude, but I mean, I think you should look in on him.
Whether
All you gotta do is look at the door. If I don't get no answer, no noise, something I think has happened to the gentleman in there, sir.
We must continue. Go on, please.
You're gonna keep giving him what, 450 volts every shot now?
That's correct. Continue. The next word is white.
Combine this repeated prodding with the experiment's perceived credibility, and you can start to understand why the participants gave in to the orders. And that was just the original experiment. There were 19 variations overall. Experiment 10 took place in a simple research office with no connection to Yale University, so the university's reputation wouldn't matter. This simple change caused the compliance rate to drop to 47.5%. It's also been replicated across various countries, and the results were pretty much the same all throughout. which is kind of scary. Because although the original experiment was conducted in the US, its relevance extends beyond it to reflect fundamental human nature. Stanley Milgram read about how the Nazis justified the Holocaust. Many of them chalked it up to obedience. So his goal for this experiment was to see whether something like that could have been true. He wanted to see just how far people would go to follow orders if it involved hurting other people. The answer he discovered was that people can go pretty far. But it wasn't just because of obedience. One of the things that mattered most was external credibility, a person or an institution's outward appearance and how trustworthy they seem. Because we care a lot about illusions, and the moment they fall apart, we start questioning our actions. There's this one episode from Black Mirror called Men Against Fire that takes this idea to the extreme. In it, the protagonist is a soldier tasked to kill mutants called roaches. For the protagonist, it's business as usual until his neural implant malfunctions and he finally sees that these roaches are actually just ordinary humans targeted for genocide. We haven't gotten that far with neural implants as of yet, but this kind of thing does also happen in real life. In order to train effective soldiers, part of their training is to dehumanize the enemy, to pretend that the person on the other side of the gun is a monster and doesn't have a wife and kids that'll miss them when they're gone. It's these kinds of illusions that make it easier to follow orders. But these illusions are not limited to warfare. We find ourselves charmed daily by suits, titles, and lab coats. It's funny how we remind ourselves not to judge a book by its cover when it comes to people who don't dress or act to a certain standard, but overlook the people who impress us. Because those people have baggage too, they all make mistakes. It's all just hidden under an expensive suit and awesome hair. So who do you trust? Simple. Trust yourself.
I refuse to.
Feel free to say no if somebody tells you to do something you don't want to.
You had no other choice. You must
Yes,
go.
I have a choice.
Because the world is a crossfire of everybody's personal interests. You'll be caught in it no matter what. The only thing you can really do is to armor yourself with the security of knowing that it's okay to just think about yourself. Hey, if you like that, please like and subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you next time.